on the SoulBuffalo Earth Report, episode 17. Matt, what's shaking, man? How's everything in Maine?
Hey, man, we're doing all right. We're doing all right. Good to see you, Dave.
Good to see you. Good to see you. So Matt and I met, like so many of our other friends that are working deep in the plastic world, on the middle of a ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean last May on the Ocean Plastic Leadership Summit. And Matt and I found ourselves talking at 3 a.m. quite a bit on the roof of said ship. Yeah, man, Matt and his organization is doing an incredible amount of work. And today we're going to talk about just that and definitely dive into the reuse side of the equation.
Awesome.
On plastic packaging. So how did you get into plastic, Matt? Like how did you advocate in this?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I like to go back to the beginning. You know, I actually grew up in Gloucester, Massachusetts, which is a fishing town about an hour north of Boston. If you've read The Perfect Storm or watched the movie, that's where that takes place. And so most of my buddies growing up, their dads were fishermen. And I remember, you know, these families were doing pretty well during the 70s and 80s, but the cod fishery collapsed. And I can remember virtually overnight that some of my friends, like their families had to sell their houses and their cars, and, you know, just things started to go downhill very quickly. And for me, it was like the first time that I realized that if we don't steward the natural world, not only is it bad for wildlife and for the environment, but it can be really bad for humans, for our lives and our livelihoods. And, you know, I kind of carried that idea with me to college. And when I was a freshman, at college, I took a seminar class and I read this book called The Ecology of Commerce by Paul Hawken. I don't know if you've read any of Paul Hawken's work.
I haven't. I've certainly.
Yeah. Natural Capitalism is another one. I'm sure we've got some fans on the live stream here, but you know, it was the first time that I'd ever heard of this concept of a circular economy. And, you know, this idea that we should be designing our products to be stewarded into the products of tomorrow, that we should be, you know, bringing our production systems in line with the natural world, that we should be figuring out ways to get people what they want and need without generating any waste. And it just kind of blew my mind at the time. And of course, I had no idea that, you know, I was going to spend basically the next 20 years of my life working to build it. And, you know, it's been a fun ride. You know, we're still, I still feel like we're in the early phases of really, truly creating a circular economy for the world's people. But it's really fun, and feel really just, you know, grateful every day that I get up every morning and do it.
So what was your first foray? Like, what was your first gig into this, into said plastic packaging universe?
Yeah. So, you know, funny thing is, you know, I started my career, I actually live in Maine, and I started my career working as an organizer on political campaigns. And then I eventually found my first job working for a statewide environmental watchdog group here in Maine called the Natural Resources Council. And, you know, my first day on this new job, I was asked to help organize a press conference on a bill that was going to make television and computer manufacturers responsible for paying to collect and recycle their products. And I was like, man, this is day one. Right? Yeah, this was our first, like the first extended producer responsibility law for electronics in the United States. That was my first job, was helping to pass that bill. And, you know, I couldn't believe that, you know, I got a chance to use what I was fascinated with in college and what I studied. And literally on my first real job, I was able to, like the second day on the job, organize this press conference about creating a circular economy. And so that was kind of the start. And, you know, I spent 10 years, I basically worked for two organizations my entire career. I spent 10 years there, you know, working my way up the ranks from, you know, organizer to project director to legislative director, and helping to run all the campaigns in the State House for this group. And then I joined Upstream 10 years ago, and it was an interesting moment to join Upstream, because I should probably give a little bit of history of the organization for people.
I was just going to ask.
Yeah. So we were founded back in 2003 by activists in the United States and Canada that had helped to found what we call now the Zero Waste Movement. And these were rabble rousers in the 80s and 90s. There was a lot of conversations going on, like how much recycling should we have? And some people were like, is it 30% or 50% or 60%? And they said, no, it should be zero waste. And so they really helped to build this idea during the 90s. And back then it seemed like a totally crazy idea. But fast forward to today, and it's a global meme. You know, you've got most of the Fortune 500 companies that have zero waste plans, and you've got the biggest cities in the world that are working to become zero waste cities. But they felt that during their work together during the 90s, that this movement, the zero waste movement, had become overly focused on the end of the pipe. And they said, you know, we're never going to be able to recycle or compost our way to a sustainable future. We've got to work upstream with the businesses, with government, to redesign all these systems that are generating so much waste in the first place.
And upstream, just for the people that don't know, would be from origin, from the second the raw material comes out of the ground, or design, alternative materials, different systems like reuse, which we're going to jump into. Anything I missed there?
No, I mean, you got it. I mean, it's really about like, how do we actually design this circular economy from the start? So we're not trying to fix these problems at the end of the pipe, right? We're not reliant on consumers or city governments to build the circular economy. It's really got to be upstream with business. And so anyway, I joined Upstream 10 years ago, and it was an interesting evolution because, you know, we were really focused on bringing this concept of extended producer responsibility to the United States, really this idea that corporations are the ones that need to be responsible for creating and stewarding and paying for the circular economy. And so back in 2011, when I joined, we were starting to really work on extended producer responsibility for packaging, which is fun to come full circle, Dave, because I know you've been working on this dialogue recently.
We've had pretty interesting dialogues here in the US between some of the biggest brands out there and some of the biggest environmental organizations to try to really find common ground, build consensus over what an EPR opportunity here in the US look like. And there's a lot of, it's interesting because there are a lot of models all over the world, and Europe and Canada are kind of way ahead of where we are. But Matt, you've been super helpful in those conversations and dialogues. I mean, we come in like neutral. We just want to have these hard conversations. What like when you hear, when there's just a normal person hears extended producer responsibility, I think there could be like a sort of a glaze over.
Oh yeah. 100%.
What is the heart of that wonky word that would like make it real for, you know, the everyman?
Yeah, I mean, the core idea is that, you know, businesses and corporations need to be responsible for the environmental and social impacts of their products and their packaging. So that's really the core idea. And typically what that has meant in practice is that they've helped to set up the systems that can collect and take their products back and do something useful with them when folks are done with the product or the package. And so that's kind of historically how it's been. But of course, recycling is only a small part of the puzzle, right? So, you know, I know that many of us have heard the mantra of reduce, reuse, recycle our entire lives. You know, our kids are taught it at school. We've got more people that recycle in the United States than vote. But somewhere along the line, we forgot that the first two R's, that reduce and reuse, are so much more important for the environment than recycling. And if we can figure out ways to get people what they want and what they need without generating any waste in the first place, not only are we going to do a great thing for the environment, we're also going to save businesses money. And this is something that Upstream's been working on showing and proving this to the world. And also, we create a whole lot of opportunities for entrepreneurs and investors to build this new reuse economy. And the way that I like to liken it is, you know, the founders of Upstream, who are now in their 70s, right? They talk about being
are they still rabble rousers?
The rabble rousers are still rabble rousing in their 70s for sure, I guarantee, in their 60s and 70s. So anyway, they talk about, you know, how they literally in their college dorm rooms would go like, you know, from dorm to dorm, collecting newspaper to try to get enough of it together so that they could find a buyer for the college and actually make sure that that got recycled. Because back then there was just one bin, and it was the trash bin. But today, you know, you fast forward to today and, you know, you have this massive global recycling industry, right? That didn't exist 40 years ago. And so what I always say is that we're this reuse movement is basically where the recycling movement was 40 years ago. Like, we're just getting started on really figuring out how to get people what they want without generating anything that needs to be managed like you would need to do in a recycling situation. But the good news is that we know how to do this as humans, right? Like, for almost all of human civilization, we've been reusing and refilling things. Like, this was kind of the dominant value for all of human civilization up until the modern era. So we've only been having this throwaway paradigm in existence for the last, 60 or 70 years. And of course, that's something that we can change.
My favorite scene from Mad Men is that scene when Don Draper and his family are like in the having a beautiful picnic in a park, and then they just, like, at the end of the day, they just pick up the blanket and just shake it off and just leave everything there. And it was just like, talk about, like, it's a perfect sort of metaphor for the unconscious consumer at the sort of when single-use plastic really, like, came into play. When you think about reuse, I mean, we saw Tom Zaki from TerraCycle and Loop. We both know he's he's been on the show. He's an advisor.
Oh, awesome.
I know that you
just had him on the podcast last week. Yeah.
And they have this incredible program called Loop, which is really, I would say one of the most advanced refill models, reuse models out there. And they and so basically, like, this is a big cup, but imagine if this was holding Haagen-Dazs ice cream.
Yeah.
That's essentially their model.
That's right.
Working with big brands to have you finish with your if you were to suspend disbelief and pretend this was a Haagen-Dazs ice cream.
It looks like it. I can see it.
Kind of does.
Yeah.
Then you would basically send it back or take it back at the end of the day, and you'd just continue to get your Haagen-Dazs in a new refillable or reuse container, right? I mean, like, I know it goes way deeper than that, though. What?
Yeah. I mean, the way I like to think about it is that, we all know reuse. We all do reuse systems at our home. We wash plates, we wash cups, we put our cutlery in the dishwasher, we wash our clothes, like, right. These are systems that we're used to. And then you go out into the world and you go to most restaurants and you sit down to eat at a restaurant and you're being served on a plate that was somebody else had, 20 minutes before that was washed and cleaned and put right back into service. So, we experience reuse in that way every day. But I think that most consumers, when they think about reuse, they think like, oh, I got to bring my own coffee cup everywhere, or bring my own water bottle everywhere. And I think that, I'm like a good reuse citizen, right? So I've got my laptop bag filled up with the reusable cutlery and all this stuff. But that's not the answer. That's really not the answer. Like, what the answer is that we actually need to make reuse as convenient as single use. And I think that that's when we're going to really start to see the shifts. And that's got to start upstream with the businesses, right? And so when I think about how do we mainstream this concept? How do we really change away from this single use throwaway paradigm to the real reusable paradigm of the future? It does start with food service. And it's also especially important to start with food service because of how much of the plastic pollution crisis is directly related to food service. And
getting so much worse because of the takeout culture that we're experiencing right now with the pandemic.
Totally.
Like the 30% more waste that's happening so much.
Totally.
From the fact and it's interesting, like in my little town in upstate New York, a lot of the people that own these small little restaurants that have picnic tables outside, like, they are 100% using throwaway right now.
Yeah.
Because at least in the beginning of the pandemic, they were afraid to wash dishes.
Afraid.
Totally. They just make sure everything is as safe as can be.
Yeah, I got a call from the food critic at the Washington Post a couple months ago, and he, this is a guy that's used to going out to restaurants and being served this amazing food and then writing about it. And of course, he can't do that anymore, so he's getting it all delivered to his home. And he was astounded at how much garbage he was creating and generating. And so he had this idea, like, what if I just saved it all up for 3 weeks and just saw how much there was? And he couldn't believe it. He spread out all the garbage that he'd had over the course of 3 weeks, and it basically covered his entire lawn. He said one meal, for two people, there was basically 34 different pieces of single-use garbage that came with this meal. One meal, going to his house. And he said, what can I do about this? And I said, as a consumer, there actually isn't a whole lot that you can do about it. You know, you could maybe call and say, hey, I don't need the cutlery, or I don't need the extra stuff that you're throwing in there. But for like the to-go containers and the bags, like we just need to build better systems. And so what's really exciting is that those systems are now starting to come online. So I'm, you know, I want to kind of go back to the start of the story and talk about like the economics of reuse as well. So I'm going to brag on my friends and colleagues at Upstream a little bit. So my colleagues, Miriam and Samantha, they started a project in the San Francisco Bay Area called Rethink Disposable that has now worked with more than 300 different food service operations, everything from mom and pop restaurants to chains to corporate campuses, college campuses, even food trucks. And they've been able to prove that in 100% of the cases for these restaurants that were maybe fast casual or cafeteria style operations using a lot of single-use stuff, that when they transitioned to real and reusable stuff, they, in 100% of the time, they saved money. And, you know, for a lot of restaurants, especially small restaurants that are on the margins, like saving $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 a year, it really starts to add up over time. And so, you know, we've proven now that reuse, transitioning from single use to reuse, can work for sit down dining. And what we're focused on right now is how do we do that for takeout and delivery? And so what we're really excited about is that we now have a database of about 70 different reuse service providers, is what we call these companies that are really working to create this new reuse economy in cities and in communities. And so just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, let's say that, you know, you and I were going to get a cup of coffee, and you know, we looked down and being the good environmentalists that we are, we left our reusable coffee mugs like back at the helm or back at the office, right? Well, let's say you could walk into any coffee shop, whether it was Starbucks or the, you know, the cool little local coffee roasters, and you could just rent a reusable mug. And you take it out later on that day, or I don't know about you, but I like to get 2 cups of coffee. I didn't get my second cup of coffee in before this call, which was a bummer. But you know, you want your afternoon coffee, and you just give you're at a different part of the city at a different cafe. You hand them the dirty mug. They give your next coffee to go in a clean mug. You've already paid that deposit, and on you go. And you can do the same thing with food, takeout food, or food that's delivered to your house. So let's imagine that, you know, Wednesday night, you and your wife, you guys have little kids, you don't want to cook, and you know, you call in and
we live kind of in the middle of, we're 2 hours from New York City, but like, yeah, there's nobody delivers here. So I'm just like,
no one delivers there. Oh, that's
remembering my New York City days and yeah. So, all right, pretend.
Let's pretend. Well, people. Yeah, let's pretend, right? So, So you're in New York City, and you know, you order Italian food, and you're psyched, and this time, instead of coming in all of this throwaway garbage that you're going to have to figure out what to do with and feel guilty about, it comes in a reusable set of reusable containers, right? And those reusable containers, you know, like the next time, like Friday rolls around and you're like, I don't want to cook again, and you order from a different restaurant, let's say you get Indian food this time, you can just literally hand the delivery driver the dirty containers, and those are going to get put into a system where a reuse service provider is going to come collect them, take them to a dishwashing warehouse, basically wash them all and sanitize them in these commercial dishwashing operations, and then get them right back into service for all the restaurants in the city. And so this is starting to happen in Europe. I mean, you know, what's interesting is that the Europeans didn't even invent this. Like, these systems have been in place in places like India for a long time, where they're literally delivering all these meals in reusable stainless steel containers. And there's these incredible systems that are built up around this. And so we think, you know, anybody that's watched The Lunchbox, that's a great film everybody should watch, that loves thinking about how to redesign the way that we do stuff. You know, these systems really originated not in the developed world, but in developing parts of the world. And it's something that they've been able to do for a long time. That's also, you know, the other great thing about this is that you're employing people locally. Like, this is like you're creating new service infrastructure that can't be outsourced. It's really about, like, not just, you know, what's good for the environment and what's good for business. It's also like what's good for your local economy.
That's amazing. The Lunchbox and Paul Hawken. I just got
your list.
I had to write that down. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible that something like this can emerge in a place like India, where there's a billion people and such a
Yeah.
wide, sort of disparity of wealth. The other thing that's really super cool is, I mean, like, how fast do they think it's going to take to actually get this thing up to scale? Like, what are the projections look like on that one?
Yeah, the biggest thing is infrastructure. It's like, of course, we want to get the word out there to every single restaurant and anybody that's doing sit down dining that you think disposables are cheaper, but actually they're not. And the payback period. So for sit down dining, that's an easy one. We think that that's easy to sell because it doesn't require infrastructure. It mostly requires people understanding it and then making these transitions for food service. For takeout and delivery, it requires infrastructure. And so part of what we need as well is policies that help to support the creation of that infrastructure, and that also like have it be on par with disposables. So for example, we have a policy that we've developed that puts fees on disposable to-go cups and disposable to-go containers. And it also requires restaurants to be looking at like how to the city government to help set up these reuse services for to-go cups and to-go containers so that the restaurants can essentially provide the reuse systems for free. So it's free to the consumer. And what it does is that puts the economics of the disposables on par with the reusables for the takeout and delivery. So sometimes we need policies that help create the infrastructure. Sometimes we also just need critical mass, right? So like, because these are startups that are just starting to like get into these markets, oftentimes they need investment from not just the businesses, but from city governments to say, you know what, we want to reduce waste. Like, we're spending a lot of money carting all this stuff off to the landfill. We actually can take some of our solid waste management budget and invest it in setting up some of these new reuse services and reuse systems. Those kinds of things, like that initial investment, can often be the thing that a company needs to start to be able to scale in a given city.
Amazing. It's like every day I feel like I'm blown away by some of the sort of new and the models that are coming up. Have you Algramo is pretty interesting as well. Have you paid attention?
Yes.
They're awesome. I mean, so that
on a panel with I'm forgetting his name right now. It was like a month ago.
Bauer, maybe.
Say his name again.
Brian Bauer. He's like their head.
No, it wasn't Brian. It was the founder down in Argentina. I don't know why I'm spacing out on his name, but yeah.
Cool. Yeah. It got started in South America. They have a huge footprint in Chile as well. And it's
Chile. That's where he's from. Yeah, that's right. I think he's from Chile. Yeah.
When they just did a pilot in New York City where if you're at a laundromat and you're going to the laundromat every day, you basically have like a way to get your soap in a refillable container, and then you bring the refillable container back. And it's just like combination of all these, once they're scaled up, is going to be incredible. But like, I think these like use cases in Europe and in India, and just like more case studies, and the more people can just get their head around that this is like the way, is huge. But I agree with you. Policy is definitely going to be super helpful. So like, what are you most excited about, and what is like the biggest obstacle around this? Like, what is like the thing keeping you up at night with respect to getting this at scale?
Well, one of the things I'm most excited about, you just mentioned Loop, right? So they just inked a partnership with Burger King, McDonald's, and Tim Hortons to start piloting serving to-go food from fast food, these, biggest fast food companies in the world, especially in North America, in reusable containers. And I think what's exciting about that as well is that Tom and the TerraCycle folks are really looking for, how do we create the infrastructure? And so they're thinking, like, for example, if I were to, go to McDonald's, get a burger and fries in a reusable container, in a reusable cup. Well, let's say like later on that afternoon, I'm heading to the grocery store, and there's like a reverse vending machine, or there's some kind of kiosk where I can literally just take my Burger King container and stick it right in there. And that's now part of this new infrastructure. What's also exciting is that I can then go in the grocery store, and there's going to be products that are going to be in reusable containers that I can then take home. And let's say that, I forgot I wanted to order a couple more things online. I go to Loop Store and I order stuff delivered to my home in reusable containers, but it's all part of the same service infrastructure. So I can when somebody comes to my home to deliver me my products in reusable containers, I can literally give them the Burger King container and the Burger King cup, right? Because it's part of this like closed system where all of these different locations are using reusable containers and reusable packaging for consumer goods, for food service, for personal care products, and it's operating at home, at brick and mortar retail, and in these kind of delivery systems. And so this is like, this is the future. I mean, for me, this, I often say like, well, when I was a kid, we just had one bin, right? It was the trash bin. And then, we had the recycling bin that got added on. And then the composting bin came in. And the fourth bin is really the reuse bin. And I think that over time, like our goal is to like get rid of that trash bin, shrink the recycling bin, and blow up the reuse bin. That's kind of the simplest way to describe it.
Amazing. Yeah. I'm just, I get really excited about this. What are the challenges? Is it just policy? Is it getting good policy in place and getting the monetary sort of setup behind it to get the sort of financial behind scaling this thing?
The biggest obstacle is convenience, right? I think, it's like, it's the disposability is convenient. And I think that like, we've become so accustomed to like the throwaway disposable throughput in our lives. I think COVID is actually waking some of us up to it. Even my own family. I mean, we're the greenie zero waste people, but like even my own family, it's like we have, our hall closet. It was like, how did we get so many goddamn Amazon boxes stuck in this closet, right? And I think that a lot of people are having that experience that I mentioned that the Washington Post reporter had. So you used to go out and do all this stuff out there in the world, but now you're having all this stuff delivered to your home, and there's a lot of garbage associated with it. And so I think that, the convenience of just like, I don't want this, I just throw it away. And the design of that system, like the fact that most of the consumer goods companies and the fast food and, fast casual dining, like we've designed these systems to be one-way systems. And so figuring out like how we reverse engineer them to be reuse systems that are convenient for the customer so that it doesn't become a burden. Like, walking around with my laptop bag full of reusables is a burden. I'm just gonna say it. And so if I can take the responsibility off myself, put it on the people that I'm buying products and services from, and have them figure it out, now we've got a whole new, thing that can happen. And I really want to see this be part of these extended producer responsibility for packaging conversations, because it's not just about recycling. Like if we're just managing too much stuff more efficiently, we won't have done a really good service for the planet. And this is my critique of a lot of circular economy conversations. It's like, oh, how do we recycle more? But if we're just basically having these systems that are relying on an unnecessarily large amount of material throughput, because they're one-way systems, because they're based on like, I have this thing, it goes into my house or my office, I take it, I put it in a bin, and then there's a whole nother system that's got to take that, ship it around the world, and turn it into something better. There's a lot of energy, natural resources, trees, oil, everything that's associated with that. But if we can find ways to get people what they want and need without generating any waste at all, I mean, I get excited about these companies like that are creating the cleaning products where they give you one container. They'll send you your one spray bottle, and then you're signed up for a subscription service, and you get this little pod that you stick in there, fill in the water, and now you're not buying water. You're not buying bottles all the time. You're just buying that little bit of cleaner that you need. And because you're paying for the service, you're paying for the clean house, not the bottles, right?
Yep. Totally. Oh my God. Time is, we should extend these shows, I think, because
we're closing in on time here, huh? I didn't realize that either. I was just chatting away.
Let me ask you a question. Sort of I ask this to a lot of folks, and I sort of change it a lot, and some people find it easy and some find it hard. If you could spend like a day or even a half a day with like your environmental superhero, they can be alive, they can be dead. You can get super creative here, but if you like, who would that be? And you can go super loose. If it's a if it's a group of people, that's allowed. There's really not many rules, but
yeah, you know, I mean, this might be an interesting answer here. I mean, there's so many environmental superheroes that I've admired and looked up to and read about, and you know, but I feel like problem solving is like, I mean, that's really what we need more than anything right now. And I've always been fascinated about really big outside the box thinkers. And this might be a cliche answer, but you know, one of my favorite quotes is from Albert Einstein, where he said, you know, if I was given an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes defining the problem and 5 minutes solving it. And I think there's just something that's really rich about that. And I think that, you know, for you and I, where we run dialogues with big businesses and city government officials and policymakers, and, you know, really understanding the problems that we're trying to solve and drilling down into them and saying, like, you know, what could we do to solve these problems? You know, as you know, like thinking about like, how do we get out of like kind of conventional thinking and start really getting creative for how we're going to solve the problems that humanity is facing right now, which are huge. I mean, environmental problems are, you know, they're a huge part of it, but we also have so many other problems that are going on right now, you know, the pandemic being central.
we definitely don't have a shortage of problems, big, sticky, challenging problems. That's for sure. I love your answer, by the way. And I'd be totally down to hang out with you and Einstein if we can figure that out.
That'd be so fun, man. Wouldn't that be awesome?
It would be amazing. Well, dude, thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate you coming on. Super grateful. Again, could keep on going. And, you know, next time maybe we should, I'm going to extend these shows. That's what's happening.
Love it.
In the meantime, you can find out more about Matt. Can you tell everybody about your podcast?
Yeah. So we're the Indisposable Podcast. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and we'd love for you to subscribe. Check it out. We're focused 100% on solutions to plastic pollution. So we just feature the heroes that are kind of creating this beautiful new world that we've been talking about today on the show. And you can find more about Upstream at upstreamsolutions.org, and I'm at mattprindiville.com. So it's great to be here with you guys.
Great to see you, my friend. Super grateful. We're here on the SoulBuffalo Earth Report, episode 17, coming to a close. And everybody have a really great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Awesome.
Take it easy.